Welcome, everyone, to the November 2023 Agenda Review Meeting. Happy to see everyone. Today, we have a new commissioner that I would like to introduce, Miss Katie Overton. She is a practicing attorney, and I'd like for her, if she is willing, just to give us a little background and say a few words. Hit that left button.
Yeah, like I said, my name is Katie. I'm an attorney with Racing here in Knoxville. I practice mostly employment law, but dabble in municipal stuff. I'm from Knoxville. I went to high school with UT twice, so I'm really excited to serve and contribute to Knox County and meet all of you. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you and welcome aboard. At this time, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Miss Amy Brooks.
I wonder if you turn that off, I wonder if only one.
Okay, let's try it.
Oh, it's because he needs to turn his off. Oh, there we go.
We're having issues over here too. None of ours are working. Oh, no.
There they go. It just takes a minute. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I just have a couple updates to share with you today. The mobility plan, which we update every 4 years out of our transportation planning group, is getting kicked off next week. We are going to have our first technical advisory committee meeting on November 14th. It'll be in the small assembly room. We're going to have a survey, interactive map, open soon as a way to give feedback early in the process. So we'll be sharing that with you all. Our consultants from Stantec will be in town next week to help facilitate that meeting. So we're excited to get that underway. The Growth Policy Coordinating Committee will meet on November 27th. For the first of at least 2 public hearings. There was an informational meeting held 2 weeks ago, and thank you for those of you who were able to attend. There are some resources related to the growth policy plan update available on the Advanced Knox website, so I encourage you to take a look at that. If you have any trouble finding it, just let me know. If you have any questions about the process or would like more information, please reach out anytime. That's all I have for today. I'm going to get to the agenda.
Please.
Okay. So we'll start off with Ms. Hillman, item number 10, which is 11F23RZ. Keith Foster's. She's ready.
Okay. So this request is for 4 parcels on Trigg Street. It's north of Brooks Avenue and just west of Williams Creek. It comprises 0.62 acres in total. The request is to rezone these parcels from RN2 to RN4, general residential neighborhood, and the HP overlay would be retained. As you can see, most of the surrounding residential area is zoned RN2 or RN1. There is a city-owned natural area to the northeast, and that's a conservation area for the Williams Creek watershed. To the northwest, there is a significant swath of RN6 zoning with multifamily development. And then there's a little patch of orange here. And that is from a recent rezoning from RN2 to RN4, as is being requested here. I believe townhouse development is being proposed there. The land use classification in the Northwest County, the land use classification in the sector plan and the 1-year plan is traditional neighborhood residential, which permits consideration of RN1 through RN4 zoning. And in the aerial, you can see that the predominant land use surrounding the subject property is comprised of 1 or 2 units on lots among forested slopes. The 5 Points KCDC Affordable Housing Community is located to the northwest. You can see the subject property is forested, though historical aerials demonstrate that much of this was previously disturbed at one point. With the existing land use zoomed in, you can see that there is multifamily land use in the immediate vicinity. This is in the form of duplexes. Although the neighborhood is mostly zoned RN2, these duplexes conform more with the RN3 zoning in terms of minimum lot size standards and or the principal use standards, where you can have 2 duplexes, where you have 2 duplexes here on single lots, which is not permissible in RN2, but can be considered in RN3. Staff are recommending RN3 zoning as opposed to the requested RN4 because it's consistent with the sector plan and more compatible with surrounding development. As stated before, some of the surrounding residential development is already more in compliance with RN3. This is an area that will maintain safe walking access to transit after the reimagined CAP plan is implemented. I'll show where. So this bus line will be redirected, but this one will be maintained, and it's about a quarter-mile walking distance from the subject property. You can also see that the Knoxville Botanical Gardens are here, and discussions with Parks and Recreation indicate that an extension of the East Knox Greenway Trail is planned to occur, and it will extend from Harriet Tubman Park to the Botanical Gardens and down along Williams Creek. So these are recreational and multimodal assets that do support capacity for more residential development here. At most, RN3 could permit up to 8 townhouses if the lots were merged, but that would go through a special use review to evaluate its impact on the surrounding neighborhood, whereas the requested RN4 district could permit up to 8 townhouses or apartment units by right and 13 through special use review. So RN3 provides a more measured transition, whereas RN4 is fairly severe. And so for these reasons, we're recommending RN3. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question, Jesse. So, and it's hard because you're behind me. So is this, it's in the traditional neighborhood area. I mean, with the city recommendation or with the missing middle that's coming through, is this one of the areas that is, one of the neighborhoods that is inside that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I guess the question would be, as that is moving forward, would it be any different if the overlay was already on it today? Do you follow what I'm asking?
In terms of the zoning district?
Yeah, or the missing middle, yeah, if that was passed today, would your recommendation be any different? Would it allow more density versus the 8 townhomes, that type of thing?
Yeah, since the amendments have not been adopted either by, or recommended by this body or adopted by city council, that wasn't part of the consideration here. We were thinking about what exists currently. But yes, this area is TDR and would be incorporated into the missing middle housing, and there are certain housing forms that are permitted in RN3 that are not permitted in RN2, so there's more density potential.
Right. Yeah, I guess I was just trying to understand, because I know it allows townhomes in RN3 and RN4, but would it, with the overlay of the missing middle, would it allow for more? Even though it's not, I know it's not approved and not adopted yet, but would it allow for more than 8?
I can research that based on the existing amendments and follow up with the scenario.
Yeah, that's fine. It was just more of a question. Thank you.
I've got one quick question.
Yeah.
Comparing RN4 and RN3 in the total square footage of the property, is there a difference in total number of units, townhomes possible, or is it the same?
It would be up to 8 townhomes in both districts, but one would be permitted by right and one would be through special use. And then in RN4, there's a potential for up to 13 apartment units through special use.
But the townhome count is the same,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Any more? Okay, we'll move on to item number 19, which is an ordinance amendment that had been postponed.
So I'll give a quick recap of the timeline for 8E23OA, which is focused on the landscape article of the zoning ordinance. So this was originally proposed in August, along with other amendments intended to better support middle housing development. There were 2 30-day postponements, and then a planning commissioner provided a revised ordinance amendment proposal, and the applicant substituted their original request with the new language. Then there was another 30-day postponement to allow time for consideration of that revised language. So the current amendment requests are as follows. It adds criteria so that a landscape plan is not required for multifamily and townhouse developments that disturb less than 10,000 square feet, unless it's required in another section. It removes the requirement to specify the species or names of plantings in a landscape plan if it's in a residential lot that's less than 10,000 square feet. However, a list of plants installed would be maintained on site for inspection approval. It allows a walking path to encroach into a landscape buffer yard by up to 30% in a Class A yard and 25% in a Class B yard. This would only occur if there's no utilization of a reduction in buffer yard width in any other section, and if the walking path doesn't adjoin another impervious area. It increases the permitted buffer yard reduction from 30% to 40% if the buffer yard incorporates a wall, solid fence, or a combination of that. And it eliminates the requirement for a Class B buffer yard in a non-residential district when it abuts a residential district if the proposed development in that non-residential district is a residential use. And there's no specification of the type of residential use. And then it removes the requirement of a Class A buffer yard for multifamily parking lots abutting RN3, RN2, RN1, or EN districts if the parking lot serves fewer than 5 dwelling units and a fence or solid wall is installed. Staff are recommending denying the proposed amendments. The basis for this denial is that we did have a thorough missing middle housing scan completed last year, one of the purposes of which was to identify barriers to middle housing, and landscaping and buffer yards were not mentioned as an impediment to middle housing forms. But the core reason for recommending denial at this stage is that there is a simultaneous ordinance amendment process occurring that is focused on landscaping. The City Tree Board is tasked with researching and making recommendations on legislation related to forestry and vegetation. And the Tree Board is partnering with the East Tennessee chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects and other stakeholders to develop landscape amendments to the zoning ordinance that are in part stemming from recommendations in the Knoxville Urban Forest Master Plan, which is anticipated to be complete by December or January. The preliminary recommendations in this plan are the result of extensive community engagement over the past year. So staff are recommending denial so that this more comprehensive, community-informed, and publicly accessible process can occur via the Tree Board. And we do encourage the applicant and any other interested parties to contact the Tree Board and participate in that process. Zoning amendments through the Tree Board are anticipated to be proposed by the end of January. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jesse. Now we'll switch it over to Naomi for item number 21. It's a rezoning by BB Investment Properties. It might take us a minute to, there we go.
$10K23 RZBB Investment Properties. This particular property is currently zoned RA, low-density residential. The request from the applicant was planned residential up to 5 dwelling units per acre. Staff is recommending, after consulting with Knox County Public Works and Engineering, up to 4 dwelling units per acre because it is consistent with the development, subject to one condition, which is a type A landscaping buffer adjacent to the industrial property to the rear. This property is surrounded by a number of community assets. It is in an area with a mix of residential zones, densities, along with industrial and civic uses. There is a large industrial node to the south, and this property abuts the industrial zone. The minimum lot size requirement of the property's current RA zone equates to a density of 4 dwelling units per acre. The recommendation to approve the PR zone up to 4 dwelling units keeps with the density similar to what the property currently has. However, the PR zone allows clustering, which would enable dwellings to be built further away from the I zone. Built out at 4 dwelling units per acre, this property could be developed with approximately 19 dwelling units. The current RA zone would allow for 21. The requested density of 5 dwelling units could allow for 25 dwellings. Development plan approval is required by the Planning Commission in the PR zone, and access would be on Byington Beaver Ridge Road, which is managed by TDOT and would require their approval. The property is located within the parental responsibility zone. However, there are no sidewalks leading up to either school. There appears to be a blue line stream to the front of the property behind the existing house. Site plans would be required to meet the requirements of the Knox County Stormwater Ordinance. The subject property is designated as low-density residential for the land use classification in the Northwest County sector, which allows for consideration of the PR zone in the planned growth area, or planned growth boundary of the growth plan. The subject property does have rail lines in close proximity, making it ideal for industrial uses. There are several large manufacturing businesses in close proximity, and there are also several housing options, including a manufactured home park, duplexes, single-family residential homes, and nearby schools. Due to the mixture of uses in the area, a landscaping buffer is important to shield future residential development from the higher intensity uses in the industrial zone. There is a large like lumber manufacturing plant right here, which could potentially be noisy, and a buffer could help mitigate the noise from the forklifts and whatnot. As you can see here, this is the existing land uses. We've got single-family residential, industrial, we've got some utilities, and then the rail lines. The surrounding properties have not substantially changed over the past 10 to 20 years. It's located within 1 mile of Carnes High and Carnes Elementary School. Historical aerials show that sometime between 2016 and 2018, Carnes Valley Drive, a major arterial, was extended south of Oak Ridge Highway to connect Westcott Boulevard. Carnes Valley Drive is part of a network of classified streets in the area. It connects to Byington Beaver Ridge Road and Byington Solway Road. The Development Corporation developed the Carnes Valley Business Park north of the Carnes High School in 2020. So again, the staff recommendation is to rezone the property from RA, low-density residential, to planned residential up to 4 dwelling units, subject to a Type A landscaping buffer on the rear of the property adjacent to the industrial. And this is just an example of the Type A buffer requirements. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, seeing no questions, we can move on to 11A 23RZ.
So in this case, we've got John Sevier Joint Ventures and Red Door Homes. The property is currently zoned agricultural, and they are requesting to be rezoned to planned residential as well, up to 5 dwelling units per acre. Staff are recommending the approval of the planned residential because it is consistent with the sector plan designation and would allow for development compatible with the surrounding land use and zoning patterns, subject to 3 conditions. Maintain a tree buffer with 50 feet of depth along East Governor John Sevier Highway frontage as recommended by the Governor John Sevier Highway Corridor Study. High visibility tree protection fencing shall be installed before clearing and grading activities begin and maintained until the site and building construction is complete. No clearing or grading of the site shall be permitted until a concept plan is approved by the Planning Commission, and provide a vegetated buffer consisting of a type P landscaping screen of 12 feet in depth adjacent to the agricultural zoned parcel to the west. Again, the planned residential zone is intended to provide options for residential development, and such developments shall be compatible with the surrounding adjacent zones. Surrounding development consists of single-family and multifamily residential developments, which is consistent in the PR zone. The subject property is designated as the low-density residential land use classification in the South County Sector Plan, which does allow for the consideration of PR zone in the planned growth areas of the growth policy plan. The existing land uses are mixed with various housing options and commercial properties. The property to the north was developed with single-family residential homes beginning in 2018. The property to the south was developed with single-family residential homes in the 1960s. Considering the ongoing demand for a range of housing options, the proposed rezoning from ag to PR zone presents an opportunity to meet this demand where it can be consistent with surrounding development. And again, our recommendation is approval subject to the 3 conditions that I've already discussed. And here is an example of the type B landscaping screening that would be required. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Naomi. For the buffer, I know that there is the requirement because of that area, but is it possible for the conditions to include keeping what is there currently as opposed to taking it down and then putting stuff back?
If I recall correctly, and planning staff, feel free to pitch in if I'm speaking correctly, I believe that is part of the requirement of the Governor John Sphere study, is to maintain those existing mature trees.
Yes, that's correct.
I think it is. We had one 6 months ago or 9 months ago where they had to keep, it's like a North or a John Sevier corridor requirement.
Yeah.
I knew that it is a requirement, but I didn't know that it was to keep the mature trees. I thought it was just to keep the buffer. So it is the
No,
mature trees.
I think it is, yeah.
Okay.
Is it 50 feet from the right-of-way line or 50 feet from the current road?
I believe it's from the right-of-way line. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Naomi. I'll turn it over to Mr. Reynolds.
Commissioner Hill, I'll be recusing from item number 12.
Okay. Item number 12 is Middlebrook Grove. This is in the northwest city area off of Humboldt and Francis. The request is for 66 detached house lots, and this is a little bit unique in that they are asking, there's technically 2 different plans attached to your agenda. One was 66 lots and one was 67 lots. The 67 lot plan is really just as a reference for you to know what their intention is if they're able to obtain zoning variances from the City of Knoxville Board of Zoning Appeals. The main plan that we're looking at, the concept plan, is compliant with zoning. So that's the 66 lot subdivision. And then if they can get the variances, then the 67 lots could be considered and be consistent with zoning. And I can show you where the extra lot will be if they do get variances. Background is pretty basic. So the property was rezoned from ag to RN2 in April 2023. They are requesting 2 variances to the subdivision regulations, an intersection separation variance, and I'll get more into detail here in just a second about that. And the other one is a tangent variance between two curves. It's called a broken back tangent curve, or tangent. It's really at the straight section between two curves, and because of the travel speed, it's really not, of the subdivision, it's really not a problem to reduce that. There's either going to be 2 or 3 shared permanent access easements in the subdivision, and I highlighted in blue here, and again, I'll kind of get into that in a bit more detail. And there's going to be a boulevard entrance per the requirement of Knoxville Fire Department. Staff recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. We're also recommending approval of the 2 variances, and you'll see there's going to be different approval language this month for subdivision variances, so just kind of bear with us, a lot of language associated with those. If you look at the staff report, you'll see what all that entails. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to answer them as best I can. Just quick overview, an aerial of the site. It's currently pretty well vegetated. To the western edge is Humboldt Road. Humboldt is an arterial road that connects basically through Francis Road. It goes all the way down to Middlebrook and then goes up to close to Amherst, but I think it's Ball Camp, I think. Always get the roads mixed up just to the north. Again, to the south is Francis. So technically the property does have frontage on Francis, but really for a true road connection for a subdivision, it's not ideal. They don't have proper site distance at that access point. The only access opportunity is really off of Humboldt for the entire subdivision. Mentioning the fire department standards, the City of Knoxville Fire Code requires 2 access points if you have 30 lots or more, or 30 units on a road segment. This has more than 30, it has 66 or 67 lots. In discussion with the fire department, they felt that this design was acceptable, a median entrance, and then with a traffic circle at the first intersection to help separate lanes of traffic. So if there was ever an issue at the entrance road, hopefully the boulevard design would help get emergency vehicles in and out of the subdivision a little bit better. If you look to the northeast side of the property, there's the railroad tracks and old Amherst Road that comes into the property. It looks like it kind of dead ends in something that they could use as an access point, but they really can't. It's really right away for the railroad, unfortunately. They just don't have the frontage to actually make that connection work. Just want to point that out just in case you have a question about that location. So part of the issue with this request is what we call, so our shared permanent access easement option for access to lots. A shared permanent access easement, what we call a SPAE, can have up to 5 lots on it. It includes any lot that has frontage on a public road that the access easement crosses. The driving surface and width for the driveway is approved by engineering. It has to be the easement has to be at least 25 feet wide. And kind of a big thing with the city zoning code is that this is not considered a road. You're not creating, other than legal access, you're not really creating a new frontage. And the SPAE standards, though technically they apply in the city of Knoxville, the zoning code standards in the city don't really work well with the SPAE, and I'll try to explain that here in a second. So the city zoning code has 4 different lot types. It has an interior lot, a corner lot, a through lot, which is kind of a double frontage lot, and a flag lot. And the SPAE, in this case, or the lots off the SPAEs, in this case, are more like flag lots. They're lots that are behind other lots with frontage. And the front setback for a flag lot is abutting the rear of the lot in front of it. So you can't have lots turned sideways to the street. They have to all be facing the street because your front lot line, your front setback always faces the street. Even if you're behind other lots, your front lot line has to face the street. So that's what you're seeing in these, group of lots, all the houses are facing the internal road, which is over here, instead of turned sideways. So this is, again, the one on the left, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to see if you're looking at the TV screen. But all the lots are facing a public road, even the one up here off the cul-de-sac. If the variances are approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, their intent is to turn the lots facing the shared permanent access easement. So they're just kind of like lined up, like you would, as if this bay was a road. The only other difference would be in our 66 lot version, the 4 lots along Francis, they're showing 2 lots actually facing and using this bay off the internal road, and only 2 lots that come off of Francis. And then if the variances are approved, the 4 lots here are coming off of Francis with this bay. I don't know, they should be able to do it this bay in either version. I'm not sure why they didn't in this case. In the 66 lot version, they're showing 6 lots off of this bay, and they can't do that. They'll have to remove one of those lots from that bay one way or another. So either go ahead and use this design on the 66 lot version or do something else. I'll figure that out, but I don't have a concern with being able to get 66 lots one way or the other. So the bigger question, regarding the variances, is the intersection separation on Humboldt. Typically, so we have, so this is their entrance road to Humboldt, and then there's Creekhead Drive just to the north. Typically, we want intersections or road access points to line up. So ideally, their road would come in at the Creekhead Drive intersection. However, the problem is Creekhead doesn't have sight distance. That intersection point doesn't have the actual required sight distance needed. So you're kind of working with 2 different problems. Either you line them up and have a sight distance problem, or you offset the intersections, and at least the new road can get sight distance. And the preference at this point is to offset the intersections and get the sight distance that's required. Typically, intersections on a arterial are required to have a 400-foot separation. They're asking for 190 feet separation. And again, you're kind of working off of 2 evils, like what's the lesser of 2 evils. And unfortunately here, we feel it's the separation is more acceptable than having the lack of sight distance. And being located where they are. So 2 issues that could come up is either you have the intersection is too close, you have people turning left, trying to turn left into the subdivision or Creekhead, and then you have a queuing where the queue of people trying to turn back up into the next intersection, but we don't really feel like that's going to have a queuing problem here. And being that the new road is on the south side of the existing Creekhead, you're not going to have people turning left out of the 2 roads and then, running into each other, because if they turn left, they're going opposite directions here. Turn left out of Road A, you're going south. Turn left out of Creekhead, and you're going north. If they were opposite, then they'd basically be turning towards each other, which is not the most ideal situation. So it's kind of what we're stuck with on the variance front on the intersection separation. So have a couple images that show the road conditions from the different. This is from looking at Road A from street view. Again, this is looking at from Creekhead. We can look at them if you want to, but I have them in here just as reference. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Don't look like any questions. Okay, thank you, Mike. We can move on to item number 13.
Okay, so this request is to remove a condition of a previous concept plan approval of extending Parasol Lane to Autumn Creek Drive. The Basically, what's happening is the rest of the subdivision is being built out in phases. The creek, one with Autumn Creek Drive, the Highlands at Clear Spring. And they just need to get this resolved. What happened is in 2005, there was two subdivisions, happened to be on the exact same planning commission agenda that are adjacent, and they saw the opportunity to make a connection between the two. The subdivision on the right built its roads, platted just before the subdivision on the left did. When the subdivision on the left was, come to realize the right-of-ways were offset, they weren't actually lined up. The properties on the other side of that future right-of-way got built, now kind of in a pickle. There's not really enough space to turn Parasol Lane to that future right-of-way, squeeze that road through that little narrow section, and make all the improvements that are needed. So more than likely, you would end up impacting one or more properties by trying to extend Parasol Lane. City engineering, and also just kind of complicate things even more. When the two subdivisions were approved originally, they were both in the county. The Autumn Creek Drive subdivision, the Highlands at Clear Spring, it's now in the city. It was annexed into the city sometime after 2005. I can't remember, it was like 2006, 2007, something like that. So we're working with both city engineering, county engineering, trying to deal with the issue, but both of them come to agreement that it's not very likely that Parasol Lane can be extended. And so staff is in agreement to approve the removal of the condition to connect the two subdivisions.
Just a quick question on that. Is, because they're offset from each other, and you may have said this and I didn't hear it, but is there just not enough width for there to be a road going between there?
I think it's 20 feet here or somewhere close to that, but part of the problem is Parasol Lane is, it's oriented this way already, and then you've got to turn it really fast. And then, so there's just a lot of geometry problems that are kind of happening there. You could get a driving surface through there technically, but everything from a design standpoint would be complicated.
Okay. We can move on to the plan development, 11A23 PD, David Cockrell.
Okay, so in 2022, the Planning Commission and City Council approved a preliminary plan for this plan development. Plan developments have two different steps. The first step is the preliminary plan. It outlines how they want to develop the property, and the big thing is exceptions to the underlying zoning district to allow their project to happen the way they want to make it happen without having it. So they're essentially not rezoning the property, but they are getting exceptions to the underlying zoning. They have to outline the community benefits, because that's part of the requirement of plan development is that there's a community benefit. If you're going to get something, you got to give something in return. So here, the preliminary plan had three exceptions. One was to allow multifamily dwellings in the RN2 zone. Currently, the RN2 zone only allows single family and duplexes. The second is to allow one dwelling unit per 3,500 square feet of land area. Essentially, that's the way the City of Knoxville zoning code calculates number of dwelling units, multifamily dwelling units that are permissible. So they had to add that to their to the dimensional standards. And the third was to remove or delete RN2 from Article 10.1.a, which basically says that the RN2 zone and a couple other zones only allow one principal structure per lot. So by deleting this, RN2 from this article section, they can have three buildings on the property. Otherwise, they would have to split the property into like 3 lots that each have 1 building each, which doesn't really make sense for how this property will be developed. So the community benefits was the preservation of the historic Giffen School structure, which is on the right side of the screen here. The second benefit was to provide workforce housing, and the third benefit was to provide a community gathering space made available to the neighborhood groups. And the neighbor or the community gathering space is going to be in the old structure, kind of in this back left-hand corner. And what I've highlighted here is that the 2 new structures are to the left. So here's the existing structure. They intend to get historic tax credits, so it will go through the National Park Service review process. There's also conservation easements from Knox Heritage on the site, so the redevelopment or rehabilitation of the school should be done to National Park Service standards, which are pretty high level, like pretty high standards. So I haven't really concentrated too much on that structure other than there will be living units in it. And that's where the community gathering space is. The 2 new structures will be over to the left where there was like, play fields and such for the school. This gives you just a general idea of what they're wanting to build. It's supposed to be, so there's the old historic school, there's a kind of a mid-century modern addition to the school, and these new structures are more aligned with the mid-century modern addition to the school, which sits between the oldest part of the school and the new structures. Everything that they're showing in the plan aligns with the preliminary plan approval. They had 2 new structures. They're rehabilitating the old school. They're creating community gathering spaces, and the project meets all the other zoning requirements of the RN2 zone. So staff is recommending approval of the final plan.
Any questions? Okay. We'll move on to item number 24. You all have received a few comments about this one.
Yes. Yes, number 24. This is in the Gettysview subdivision. The request is to amend the sector plan from LDR, low density residential, to MDRO, medium density residential office, and going from planned residential at 3 dwelling units per acre to planned residential up to 18 dwelling units per acre. The staff recommendation is to deny both basically the sector plan because it's inconsistent with the surrounding development and does not meet the location criteria of medium density residential office, and because it's inconsistent with the existing low density residential land use. So Gettysview is essentially this entire area around the golf course. So the green area is the golf course. It also includes the clubhouse, and the tennis courts are technically on the proposed site. So this is the zoning map, OS. So anything you see in green, this kind of complicates it just from a review standpoint. The green area is actually in the city limits of Knoxville, the city annex, the golf course, and the clubhouse. I think it was at the request of the property owner. Several, like back in 2000 or 1996 or 1997, something like that. In this property includes the existing area where the tennis courts are. You can see here. So it's kind of an expansion of the residential area just a little bit. Again, sector plan designation, the entire subdivision is low-density residential. There's little pockets of higher intensity. So these are single-family houses here with a few triplexes and fourplexes, and then there's some attached houses towards the entrance closest to Ebenezer. At one point in time, this little neighborhood commercial area was also part of this subdivision, but when it was annexed into the city, it got different zoning. It was no longer planned residential. It was always intended to be commercial, though. This gives you a better idea of what the site looks like. Again, this rezoning request does include the tennis courts, which are owned by the country club. The larger parcel is owned by Ron Watkins, who is the original developer for Getty's View. There's single-family houses to the north and to the west, and then the golf course is to the east and to the southeast. A little bit of background. So outside of just the rezonings, there was two different development plan approvals for this site, and this is for the area outside of the tennis courts. Does not include the tennis courts. In 1999, there was 90 condominium units approved in 2 3-story structures with tuck-under parking. In 2003, they got approval for 19 condominium units, which basically replaced that original approval. And then in 2020, they came back for a new request for the original 60 condominium units. They ended up withdrawing that application. Basically, there's no changes in the vicinity that warrant amending the sector plan. The neighborhood has developed pretty much as intended over time. There's no rationale for basically creating a pocket within the Getty's View neighborhood for higher intensity development.
Hey, Mike, can you give us a little background on the overall density and how we approved the 60 units back in '99 as it relates to the rest of the layout?
Yeah, the original subdivision called this lot Villas Lots or Villas Property, something like that. So I guess it was in 1994, maybe, I can't remember, maybe 95 when the original concept plan was approved. So it was only a short time period after where they requested the first 60 units on the property. It was, at the time that it was approved, it was assumed to be appropriate for that site. There's, at the 3 dwelling units per acre for the planned residential zone, they're still not going over their density with the 60 units. Now, if you just look at that one site, obviously it's much greater than 3 dwelling units per acre, but for the entire planned residential property, it's not. In 2020, when they came back with a new application for the 60 units again, we felt that it was appropriate for them to be able to do that because there was an approval at one point in time for 60 units. They still were not exceeding the 3 dwelling units per acre in the planned residential zone, and it stuck to the original footprint of that request. Here, they're expanding that footprint for those more intense uses, so that's where the rub comes in.
Just to follow up on that too, just so I understand. So we really got two different landowners, right? You've got the original developer who had brought through a plan that was approved for 60 units, and then we have where the tennis courts are.
No, actually, so tennis courts were always planned to be tennis courts. Those were always tennis courts. They had 60 units approved for the bigger property. Then they decided to reduce that to 19 for that bigger property.
Okay.
And then they never built them. That was in 2003, I think, when they did the plan for 19 units. They never got built, so in 2020, they decided to come back to that 60-unit plan. And since it was always shown as being villas and then was approved at one point in time for 60, we felt it was still appropriate at that time.
Right, but now they're asking for 90, right? 90 units on.
Well, that's my understanding. If they get the rezoning, their intent is to have a request for up to 90.
But it just looked like, I guess, Synergy Golf, I guess they own maybe the clubhouse and the tennis courts. And then you have the original developer with Mr. Watkins. Looks like, I guess they're coming together just to try to expand the original concept of the 60 and just do it over there. Okay,
Correct.
just trying to understand. Thank you.
Hey, Mike. there was a lot of discussion in the public comments about the covenants that were there. Are those covenants still on that property? And is that a consideration that planning staff gave when they designed it?
I have not seen the covenants personally, but it's typically not something that we would take into consideration for our review, since they're private covenants. If there was very strong evidence that there was an issue, then that's, something we could look at. But really, we look at the zoning and what the land use plan says, and that if there's private covenants, then the private property owners can enforce that themselves.
Can I ask one more question? If they were to submit the 60 units as they did before in some sort of similar configuration, would we be recommending approval?
Basically what we said is that they can still apply or submit for 60 on the original footprint. Whether it's the same plan or if it's different, that, we'll have to just look through that development plan through the lens of today.
So the original footprint is everything in blue except the tennis courts,
Yeah,
correct?
except for this, correct. So,
Okay. And
except for
how
this
many
area.
is it approved for total right now on that whole area?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How many is it approved for right now on that whole area?
Well, their most current approval in 2003 was for 19 dwelling, yeah. Because
Okay.
they basically replaced the 60 with a 19. So if they want to go back to the 60, they would, regardless, they would have to have a new development plan because it's been so long, it's no longer vested approvals. They'd have to come back with a new approval.
I feel like I'm just playing catch up, but so what they're asking for is to get rid of the tennis courts. Yes.
Yeah, their proposal, this proposal would extend their development area into the tennis court area.
And I haven't seen the whole file, but I think it might be a relocation of the tennis courts. They're not just doing away with them.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to use that land for the buildings and then relocate and upgrade some of those services.
Okay. No other questions about that? I've got a couple of items I'd like to share. One is, if you'll put on your calendar, the Missing Middle Workshop, which will be November 15th at 8:30 a.m. at the City Public Works Building.
Should be on your calendar. You should have gotten a calendar invite. It's 3131 Morris Avenue. And for those of you who are not able to attend, we are going to try and make sure that it gets recorded as well. So we'll share that out with you all.
And then secondly, we have planned our Christmas party, which will be scheduled December 14th. And that will be following our Planning Commission meeting. That's a Thursday. And that'll run from 6 to 9:30. And I would like to request, we do this for as commissioners, we do it for the planning department. And we're thankful for their support, and this is a good time to share that gratitude. And also, if I am requesting that if you are willing, each of you, planning commissioners, contribute $125 to help fund the party. And if you would give that to Vice Chair Uten, I would appreciate it. Not mandatory, but just a request. I'm sorry? A donation, a contribution of 120? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say the location. It's where we had it last year and the year before at Maple Hall. They have an event space behind Babalu. So 6 to 9:30. Any other questions about that?
I have a question for Amy.
Okay.
I got your email. I guess we all got your email about the planning Zoom meeting on the, I think it was the 15th, Tennessee planning, I think. Can you kind of tell us what that's going to be about, what they're going to go over?
Let's see, so let me pull it up real quick.
Planning workshop, yeah. Or no?
You're talking about the one I sent out?
Tennessee planning
The
meeting,
one I
yeah.
sent this morning?
Yeah, on the 17th.
Correct. So our colleagues in Middle Tennessee are kind enough to share with us when they do these trainings, and they usually do them Zoom, and they send it out to all planning commissioners and individuals who serve on Board of Zoning Appeals, because there's training requirements. And so that's why I shared it out with you. I'm going to try and do a better job of getting those out to you. Let me pull it up real quick, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be one on private property rights. There'll be an individual speaking to that, and there'll also be someone speaking to planning legislation, what has come up recently and what they're anticipating coming up in the upcoming year.
For the state.
For the state, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And there should be an agenda attached to it as well.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, Tim, for organizing that.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? If not, we are adjourned.
What form of payment can we give you, Vice Chair?
If you, I mean, I just don't do Venmo because I'm old, but if you want to give me cash or check, I'll turn it into the appropriate way to give to Chair Hill and make it right. Yeah, yeah.
Venmo one of your kids.
Gold bars.
No Venmo, huh?